All right. So this is the first recording. We are going to be covering page 4 through 20. I know online it says 1 through 20. But the first few pages we are going to work through together on taking notes. All right. How this is going to work is I'm going to be using an online version of the book. You don't have access to that, but it's exactly the same as the book that you're reading from at home. So what I want you to get out is your notebook. Just a standard college ruled notebook is fine. Title it Chapter 1 Notes. And we will work through together on what the note-taking process should be like. All right. So I am going to share my screen with you, and it will be a version of the online book. So like if you were to go back to page, if I were to go back to page 3 here, what we see is just the page of the learning objectives and activities. So I believe what we are going to get through is section 1.5, I think. Nope, 1.6. So we'll get all the way through 1.5 and we won't start 1.6. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. The first thing you do when you're taking notes, right, and this is going to be for any college class, is you really want to figure out how am I going to organize my ideas and what's important, okay? So I know this is chapter 1, and it's kind of 1.1. So I know it's in sections. So chapter, section, 1.1, chapter 1, section 1. So I'm just going to title it, What is Psychology? All right. Now, please do not highlight in your book. I'm just doing this because it's the online version. Okay. And I'm not going to put anything for that. So as we start to read, okay, some people believe psychology is just the study of people and what motivates their behavior. Psychologists do study people, but they study animals as well. Okay, so I think this is pretty important. Not that. Nope. This right here, psychologists study people and animals. So from this, I gather that psychology is the study of people and animals, okay? And so that's probably the first note I'll take, okay? And that's kind of really what I see as important in this first paragraph, okay? And to better understand what motivates behavior, psychologists study not only what people and animals do, but also what happens in their bodies and in their brains as they do it. So all of a sudden we're seeing that psychologists are not just studying their behavior, what they see, but also what they can't see. So like if you're under stress, you might start to sweat, right? That's not something that we don't know what's happening inside the body to cause that, okay? So that's really all is important there. So boom, bolded word, okay? That means that it's a vocab word, okay? I would suggest highlighting all the vocab words a particular color, okay? So definitely we're going to write this, okay? You're going to write this down right here, okay? This is the definition of psychology, and this is a bold word. So psychology, and then I want you to highlight psychology in pink or orange or yellow, whatever color marker you have, okay? And throughout this process, please pause it if you need more time to write, okay? But we're just learning the process of note-taking. Okay, so our first italicized word, okay? This is our first italicized word. What this means is that this word is probably going to be a either quiz or test question, okay? So I might ask you, explain behavior, right? And then you are going to include all of our outward or overt actions and reactions, such as talking, facial expressions, and movement. Okay. So I highlight that green. So that's an italicized word. I don't know if you want to indicate in your notes that it's italicized. If you want to highlight vocab words in a certain color and then italicized words in a certain color. Okay. So notice how many notes we've taken. Let's finish page. So mental processes is another italicized word, and that's internal. Okay. Now notice how this one, I did everything. With this one, mental processes, I just stopped with internal. If you want to write out the rest, you can. But if I just know that this is outward, such talking, facial expressions, and mental processes are internal, it's going to be the things that aren't outward. So I'd be like thinking, feeling, remembering, anything like that. So I don't write all of it because I don't want you to write everything. So as both animals, researchers must observe them. Whenever a human being observes anyone or anything, there's always a possibility for the observer will see only what he or she expects to see. Okay, so expectations, expects, I could highlight that, right? But I'm not gonna because it's not something that it's referring, it's not got like a definition or an example. It's just saying expects, right? It's just emphasizing it. So I'm not gonna write that one. Psychologists don't want to let these possible biases cause them to make faulty observations. They want to be precise and to measure as carefully as they can so they can use scientific method. So scientific method is important to psychology, but it's important to any science. And I really don't, I would assume that you know what the scientific method is as a junior or senior. Okay, so what's the goal of psychology? Okay, describe. The goal is to describe, explain, predict, and control. Okay. So that's the goal of psychology. Okay. So notice out of this whole page, I only have 1, 2, 3, 4 things that I highlighted and that I would take notes on. Okay. And it's not that much. Okay. What did we focus on? We focused on bolded words and we focused on italicized words. All right. Next page. All right. So what this is doing is this is going into explaining what they mean by description, explanation, prediction, and control. All right. So what are we going to focus on? Good job. Description. Okay. So we know description is an italicized word. Okay. Observing behavior and noting everything about it. Okay. So all of a sudden we had an italicized word and now we have a definition to it. Okay. So maybe I would indent in or bullet point these, right? All right. And then it gives an example. So my advice is if you feel like you're going to have to remember this or like give an example of this, or where you would read an example, like maybe they would describe a situation and they'd say which part of the which goal of psychology is this? Is it describe, explain, predict, or control? Then I would write this. Okay, I would write the example. All right, but if that's not something that you think that you'd be able to read something and this is a description. They're describing the event. Okay, but if I were to be somebody that wrote this example down, okay, why are so many scientists to be male? I wouldn't worry about that. Okay. Who lives and breathes a computer, surrounds himself, blah, blah, blah. Okay. They might observes computer scientists. Okay. So someone who lives and breathes with the computers around, so computers, junk food, characters that it's a very masculine ambiance. Okay. If that's what they describe, if they're describing what they see, right, then it's description. Okay. So I would write, when I had this, I would then, I'd go here. And I would write with this, I'd say, can tell what is description because they talk about what they. Okay, that's all I'd write. All right, explanation. All right, so if they're seeing masculine people that are in computer science people, right? What the next goal is to explain, okay? You're trying to find an explanation for why there's less people in that field, right? Okay, so now all of a sudden, notice how easy it is to read over. We could read through this and miss this, okay? A theory is a general explanation of a set of observation and facts. Okay, that's an italicized word. All right. So theory is based on facts. Okay, they observe facts over and over and over and over, and this builds a theory. Right? Theory of gravity. Well, gravity's a thing. We can observe it. Our explanation for why things letting go, you let go of something, it falls to the ground, is gravity. Okay. So what I want to point out here is it goes over an example of an experiment, and it may refer to this, okay? What you see here is the citation. When it says Sharon et al. 2009, that is the study that was published in some journal, right? Some of these may be important, some may not, okay? I'm going to say that this one's probably not important because they just gloss over it real quick and it's not talked about later. All right, so prediction. When will it happen again? Okay, determining what will happen in the future is prediction. So can you predict behavior? And then her example of computer science is always male. If we want more women to go into computer science, we must do something to change either the environment or the perception of the environment. Okay. Again, I wouldn't write that because it's determining what will happen, predicting. If I read something where it's like, if I sleep more, I will do better in school, that's a prediction. And control, how can it be changed? Okay. The focus of control or the modification of some behavior is to change behavior from an undesirable one, such as women avoiding certain academic majors, to a desirable one, such as more quality and career choices. So if I were to apply that to a student situation that you might be typical of, let's say there's a behavior that you don't like in yourself. Maybe it's I stay up way too late. Right, I go to bed at 3 o'clock in the morning and I get up at 7. Okay. If you wanted to change that, right, is you're trying to modify the behavior. Okay. How can we control behavior? So you're going to try to modify it from a undesirable to a desirable one. Okay. So all of a sudden I have 1, 2, 3, 4 bullet points. Term that was italicized and a little bit after it. Okay, that's all for this page. So I know it can be overwhelming to have like an entire page and it's like what to write. Well, now you know that it can be like you need to read the whole thing, obviously, but it's not as fear-inducing, anxiety-inducing, thinking like, oh my God, what do I write? Well, let's just focus on the italicized words and any bold words, okay? And then if we think that it would be beneficial to help us remember, write it. But you don't have to write it verbatim. You don't have to write it exactly as it appears. You can write it in any way that you want. All right. Let's go to page 6. Okay. So not a psychological investigation to try to meet all of these 4 of these goals. Some cases may focus on certain aspects of it, okay? Again, this is just expanding upon the main ideas on the previous page. So I wouldn't be too worried about this, okay? This is just giving an example of who would do what when. So a therapist would not be so much of like describing what they see in their patients. No, they'd be more focused on like, how can I control their behavior? How can I change their behavior to help them better function in society? All right. So now we're going to get into a little bit of the history of it. Okay. Dude, cool glasses. All right. This is a cool thing about psych. It's relatively new, 135 years old. So I would maybe do the heading. Okay, the history of psychology. And then first bullet point, I'd write 135 years old. Okay. It's not that no one thought about the way people, why they do things the way they do before, but they were philosophers, medical doctors, and physiologists. A physiologist is somebody that did like the physical things, like your heartbeat, the way you move, okay? So all of a sudden we got some names here, okay? Plato, Aristotle, Descartes, that's how you pronounce it, not Descartes, tried to understand and its connection to the physical body. I would write that because those are names that they included that they didn't need to if this was just like unimportant, okay? Okay. Medical doctors and physiologists wonder why the physical connection between the body and the brain. For example, physicians Gustav Fechner. Okay, so I'd highlight him. Okay. He did the first scientific experiments. Okay. And what he would try to do is study perception, and physician Hermann von Helmholtz performed groundbreaking experiments in visual auditory perception. We'll get to that in chapter 3. But notice how for this whole page so far, I only have this and the 135 years. All right. So who were some of the earliest pioneers? So all of a sudden, I would write this as a heading. And then I would start some bullets, right? Wilhelm Wundt, okay? That's probably the first, it's a name. So let's highlight him in red. Physiologists attempted to apply scientific principles to the human mind, okay? You'll probably, more often than not, what you're gonna find is that the sentence right after the name or the term is probably going to be the most important, and you're going to want to write down the name after the first, the sentence after the name or word, okay? Students around were taught to study the structures of the mind. So we have structure of the mind. Structure of the mind. Okay, so that is structuralism. No, structuralism. Okay, that's structuralism. Okay, he believed that people could break down their own thoughts and emotions into components, right? What that was called is this objective introspection. So what he would do in order to inspect these non-physical elements, students had to learn to think objectively about their own thoughts. So you're thinking about thoughts, okay? You can't read somebody else's mind. You can't look into their eyes and be like, you're thinking this. No, it doesn't work like that. You can only think about your own thoughts. So objective introspection, okay? Objectivity was important because scientists need to remain unbiased. Observations need to be clear and precise, but unaffected by the individual's observer's beliefs and values, okay? Look at, that's all we wrote for this page. 135 years, Plato, blah, 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 Gustav Fechner, Wilhelm Wundt, objective introspection, okay? And we have that heading. All right. So Wundt would take a rock and place it in a student's hand and say, what do you think? What do you feel? Okay. This was the very first time, I think this is important because it's the first, to bring objectivity and measurement to the concept of psychology. Okay. And that goes with the name, what's his face? Wundt. Okay. So remember, he was a structuralist. Now, most of these guys were professors in college. And so obviously they had students. And these students tend to pick up where their teachers left off. So now we're into Titchener and structuralism in America. One of Wundt's students, Edward Titchener, took his ideas to the United States, okay? So he expanded on Wundt's original idea and said structuralism because you wanted to study the structure of the mind, okay? So I wouldn't add this, right? I would continue this with Wundt because he built on his ideas and we get structuralism from that. Okay, so what we have now is this paragraph breaks down what his ideas did, how he built upon Wundt. Now, this next paragraph, we see first again. Okay, so if we ever see first anything, first time doing this, first time doing that, okay, we highlight that and we get a name, Margaret F. Washburn. She was the first woman to receive her PhD in psychology. Okay. Structuralism was a dominant force, but it eventually died out. Okay. And I would highlight that. Okay. So what we have right now is Wundt and Titchener were all about structuralism and had a first woman PhD. Actually, I don't think this is important. So we're going to get rid of that. Maybe. What? Weird. So we're going to go back. Sorry for this. We're going to go back to page 7. I don't want to jump like that. Okay. So I would not highlight that. So now we're on to William James and functionalism. So we have structuralism and functionalism. Okay. Now, obviously, those are going to be different. Okay. Look at, we got a name. Boom. William James. Let's highlight that. Again, if I'm highlighting it, you should probably write it. Okay, we look at names, italicized words, and any firsts. Okay, and obviously the vocab. Again, look at, he's not a psychologist, anatomy and physiology. Okay. Wundt and Titchener, structuralism. They're studying the structures of the mind. So if your mind's like a puzzle, Wundt and Titchener and Margaret Washburn were trying to like pick your pieces of your puzzle of your head, of your brain out and looking at them and then putting them back together. Okay. William James, on the other hand, began teaching or began wanting to look at it in terms of like, how can I make how does this stuff impact everyday life? Okay. James is more interested in its function of everyday life rather than just analyzing it. Okay. I'll let you read through that. So, allows people to function in the real world, which is functionalism. Boom. Okay. So, that reminds us of something that we learned in biology 1, like bio with Schiller or McBride or whoever you had. Darwin had this idea of natural selection. Ooh, an italicized word. What do we do? Italicized green? Perfect. In which physical traits help an animal adapt to its environment and survive, passed on as offspring, right? Well, if we think natural selection is saying these physical traits help them to function better in the real world, that's how we see that Charles Darwin, let's go highlight Charles Darwin goes with William James, okay? They really didn't understand heredity yet, but they were like, okay, certain behaviors help people function in day-to-day life. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna let you go through this page on your own, okay? So go ahead and pause it and go through, and actually pause it, okay? And go through and take notes about what you think is important on this page, all right? After you get done, click play and we'll see how you did. And she was the president of my psychological association. All right, so I assume you've started to click play. All right, so we have minorities. Obviously, women at the time were the minority. Okay, so we had Margaret Floyd Washburn and Mary Wheaton Calkins. Okay, now we have also African Americans. Francis Cecil Sumner became the first PhD, African American PhD. Okay, George Jorge, is actually how it's pronounced, Sanchez conducted research in the area of intelligence, focusing on cultural bias and tests. Okay, so we want to highlight him. All right. So and you can read through this. A lot of these issues in psychology, right, you can read through, but most often they're not going to be very essential to the reading or to the tests and quizzes. So we're going to skip through that. All right. So now we're going down here. We got a new heading. Gestalt psychology. So you're going to write that as a heading. You can title it 1.3 if you like. Okay. Now, boom, we got another word or another name. Okay. So I would just highlight his name. And then I would highlight, believe psychology could not be down into broken, did not need to be broken down, but you can still understand them. Okay. So he's talking about his example of a cell phone. All right. So what we think is patterns. Okay. Wertheimer really were the first to talk about Gestalt psychology. What this is saying, this is again, bold word, very important. Gestalt psychology. What this means is an organized whole. Like literally, that's the definition of the word. Okay. What does that actually mean though, right? Well, you tend to find patterns. You tend to fill in spaces. Okay. This is really gets into cognitive psychology, and it focused not only on perception, but learning, memory, problem solving. Okay. So this big chunk, you can shorten it, right? But this is all pretty important because what this is saying, I say, look at this, right? What is it? So what do you see? What are those yellow things? You're going to say a circle. And I'd say wrong. And then I'd say, what do you see here? You'd be like a circle. I'd say wrong. I'd say, I see a bunch of circles, yellow dots in a ring shape, but it's not a circle. Like a circle would be connected, right? A continuous line. This is not. But according to Gestalt psychology, we see this as an organized whole. Our brains are like, nah, dude, that is together. Okay. So, okay. So Gestalt psychology. All right. Now we get into some stuff that's, yeah, Freud. Okay. Freud, AKA cokehead. Okay. He did so much cocaine. He actually got his friend hooked on cocaine because he was addicted to morphine and they thought cocaine could cure his friend. But then instead of just being addicted to morphine, he was also addicted to cocaine and died like 2 years later. Oops. Okay. So now we have psychoanalysis. So what do we have so far? We have structuralism, we have functionalism, we have Gestalt psychology, and now we have this thing called psychoanalysis. Okay. Psychoanalysis. And that's from Sigmund Freud. All right. separate viewpoints. The medical profession took a whole new different approach. Okay, Sigmund Freud had become a noted physician in Austria, while the structuralists were arguing with the functionalists, were specializing. The Stults were looking at the big picture. Freud, a neurologist, a medical doctor, specialized in the sort of the nervous system. He and his colleagues had long sought a way to understand patients coming to them for help. Freud's patients suffered from nervous disorders for which he and other doctors could find no physical cause. Therefore, he thought the cause must be in the mind. And that is where Freud began to explore. So if we take a look at Freud, he thought that everything wrong with somebody that didn't have a physical explanation, that it must have been the mind that was sick, okay? So he proposed that there is this unconscious, which we push or repress threatening urges or desires. Okay, we'll get into that later, right? But because it's italicized, we're going to highlight that, okay? Now, you might read something and not have any idea what it means, but because we're following these rules of bold words, names, italicized words, then write it down. Because when you come to class, we're going to have times where how did the quiz go? Well, it went horribly. Or how did your notes go? I wrote it down, but I don't know what it means, okay? This note-taking process allows you to build your learning, okay? Okay, you can write these names down, okay, as they were with Freud, right? But it's a name, so we're highlighting and writing down the names, okay? They're still influential today in a somewhat modified form. A number of followers in addition to those already named, many of whom became famous by altering his theories, but his basic ideas were the same. While some might think Sigmund Freud was the first person to deal with people suffering from various mental disorders, the truth is that mental illness was fairly long and not very pretty history. Yeah, we're gonna get into some bad stuff. All right, so psychoanalysis, we have this psychotherapy. Okay, now we're going to start moving a little quicker. A process in which a trained psychologist helps a person gain insight. Come on, load. Gain insight changes behavior. Okay, now we're into the behaviorism. Ivan Pavlov. Okay, he was a physiologist. Tried to study reflex or an involuntary reaction. Okay. So I highlight red. And we'll get his name. Get his name. Maybe highlight that in red. Boom. Okay. Okay, Pavlov, write down a brief summary of this experiment. Okay. By the early John B. Watson, we got another name. Boom. Science of behavior. Okay, science of behavior. I can do this. Science of behavior. And he was like, dude, if we're going to study this, we need to be able to observable behavior. Okay, I don't want to study a brain, something I can't see. I need to be able to measure it. Okay, that's very important. All right. Watson believed phobias, and he did an experiment on little Albert, so I'd say believe phobias are learned. So you're afraid of whatever through conditioning. Again, write it. You don't need to know what it means, but it's followed by a name, okay? All right. Watson, stimulus response, Pavlov, Freud. Again, all of this you can, I wouldn't write this down because it's repeating what was said before. Still read it, okay? But because we're following those rules, once it's like explaining something that they did that's kind of vague, then we don't have to write that down. But we have a new Mary Corver Jones decided to repeat Watson, but try to cancel out the phobias. So what this is saying is you had the little Albert study. They made little Albert afraid of a white rat. By every time they saw the white rat, they'd make a big noise and it would scare the kid. This is a baby. Okay. It was terrified. Now it wasn't just scared of rats. If you had some cotton balls and you showed him cotton balls, he'd be terrified. Okay. And then they're like, okay, we figured it out. We can do that. But Mary Corver Jones later decided to repeat Watson, and they tried to cancel out the phobia. She duplicated it with another child, little Peter, successfully conditioning Peter to be afraid of a white rabbits. She then process of counter conditioning, vocab, not vocab, italicized word. All right, so I am going to end it there, I believe. Take a look at the next page. Yep, we're going to end it there. Okay, now we're down to here. What I recommend is for 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, you take your notebook, flip it long ways, and copy this into your notes. Okay, having this into your notes is a good idea because it's a good summary of all the important information, all the things we talked about. Primary goals, describe, explain, predict, control. Okay, talked about Wundt. Okay, what he did. He was a structuralist, founded by Edward Titchener. Structuralists disagreed with functionalists because they were like, functionalists were like, I don't care what it looks like. I care how it's going to help me live in my life. Okay. Then we have Gestalt, psychoanalysis with Freud, behaviorism with Watson. All of these are very important. Okay. Now you're going to do 7 pages on your own, just like this. Okay. Now, if you're stressed out, don't be, just follow our rules, right? We're doing bold words, vocab, have a heading, right? All right, sorry, start with the headings. Then vocab, bold. Names, either the sentence before or after the name is usually important and it explains why that name's important. And then italicized words, usually the sentence before or after the italicized word is important because it's giving it some context, giving it meaning, okay? And also, a hint, if you've made it this far, fun fact, these questions right here show up on the quizzes, right? Answers are on page AK1, okay? But what I'm saying is don't use this and be like, I don't have to take notes or study for the quizzes. I can just use these. No, take notes. Because remember, at some point, we're not going to be able to use notes anymore. Okay, so, and then move on to 1.4 to 1.6. It's 7 pages, and follow the rules that we have set up. Okay. Other than that, we have, that's it. Okay, so finish the notes. Once you're done with your notes, I want you to go in and take the quiz. All right, so remember, week 1, we go to the home page. Week 1, page 1 through 20, notes and quiz. Go into that. Again, if you haven't done the Big 5 personality, that's fine. But now what you're going to do is, we did this, read page 1 through 20. You've done that, this 13 through 20 on your own. We took notes, and now you're going to take this quiz. This is an open note, open book quiz. You can take it as many times as you want until you get a 10 out of 10, okay? But use your notes. And after you take the quiz and you're like, oh, there was a question that I didn't have written in my notes, write it in your notes. Okay. Revising your notes is a very important part. So that's it. 45 minutes, not too bad. I bet you can finish up the other pages in, I don't know, an hour. So an hour total for 20 pages. That's not that much time. All right. Hang in there. You got this. And I will see you when I see you.